The wind came first, cold and colorless, whispering across the barren plain like it carried secrets from a world that had forgotten her name. Evelyn stood by the window of her small log cabin, one hand resting on the rough wood frame, the other clutching a mug of cooling tea. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly, the land pale with frost and loneliness. It had been years since she'd heard another voice inside these walls. Years since her father's boots had crossed that threshold, or her mother's laughter had warmed these empty rooms. Now it was only her breath against the silence, and the ticking of her heart to count the hours. She had built her life on small, steady things, splitting logs at dawn, hanging laundry that froze stiff on the line, talking to the chickens as if they understood. Each act was survival dressed as routine, and though the world outside moved on, Evelyn stayed, rooted to the land like the last stubborn flower before the snow. The nearest town was 12 miles away, but it might as well have been 100. They whispered about her there, the men tipping their hats in pity, the women murmuring about that girl who never married. They called her strange, some said she'd gone half mad living out there alone. Evelyn knew better. Madness was not in silence. It was in pretending loneliness didn't hurt. That evening, the sky turned a strange copper hue. Clouds gathered thick as wool, and the scent of rain drifted through the cracks in her cabin walls. She set another log on the fire and listened. Storms had a way of stirring up old memories. She remembered her father's voice, steady, patient, telling her never to fear thunder. "It's just the sky talking to itself," he'd said. Now the sky was talking again, and she found herself wishing someone else could hear it with her. By dusk, the rain came hard and certain, striking the roof with the sharp rhythm of urgency. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch to secure the shutters, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. That's when she saw it, a wagon at the edge of her clearing, one wheel sunk deep into the mud, the horses restless under the downpour. Two figures were struggling in the rain, shadows against the dim light. Her first instinct was to retreat, but something stronger, a flicker of compassion, perhaps memory, made her call out, "Need help." The younger of the two turned, the rain dripping from the brim of his hat. Even through the haze, she could see the sharp lines of his face, dust-streaked, weary, and guarded. "Wheels busted," he shouted back, his voice rough but even. "We were hoping to find shelter till it eases." Evelyn hesitated only a moment before stepping off the porch. "There's room by the fire," she said. "Bring him in." They came through the rain like ghosts returning from a long road. The older man leaned heavily on the younger's arm, his beard silver, eyes clouded with fatigue. "Much obliged, miss," he murmured, voice trembling. His breath rattled like dry leaves. The younger one guided him gently to a chair by the fire, then turned to her. "You sure it's no trouble?" "It's a big storm," she said simply. "Trouble's already here." They shed their coats, steam rising from the wet fabric. The cabin filled with the scent of rain and smoke. For a long while, none of them spoke. The fire cracked, the storm hissed outside, and Evelyn felt the strange discomfort of hearing other people breathe within her walls. She made them tea, her hands trembling slightly as she poured. The older man took his with gratitude, his fingers shaking from cold. The younger one, he said his name was James, nodded his thanks and kept his eyes on the flames. When the old man began to cough, Evelyn found a blanket and tucked it over his knees. "He's been ailing," James explained softly. "We've been on the trail near 2 weeks now. My father thought the weather would hold." "Your father?" she asked. "Not by blood," he said. "By choice." The old man smiled faintly. "Names don't make family, girl," he whispered. "He's looked after me better than any son could." Then, after a pause, he added with a flicker of humor, "Act like your family tonight, eh?" Storm's got a long tongue. Likes to talk to the lonely. Evelyn didn't answer, but something inside her shifted. She caught James's glance across the firelight, steady, quiet, uncertain, and felt warmth she hadn't expected. Hours passed. The wind moaned around the cabin, and the rain turned to sleet that clung to the windows like breath. They shared a meal of cornbread and beans, eaten in companionable silence. Every so often, James's eyes met hers, briefly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. His voice was low when he finally spoke again. "You live here alone? 4 years now. Don't it get lonely?" She thought of her days, endless chores, wordless prayers, the sound of her own heartbeat in the dark. "Sometimes," she said. "But you get used to talking less and feeling more." He nodded as if he understood that language. "World's quieter than people think," he said. Later, when the fire dimmed, Evelyn set another log in place. James had fallen asleep in the chair, his hat tilted forward, the old man resting beside him. For a moment, the cabin looked like it once had, full of life, full of sound, full of presence. She watched the rise and fall of their breathing and realized how deeply she'd missed the small noise of living. The storm softened to a whisper. Evelyn moved to the window. Outside, the world shimmered white under a thin layer of snow. The moon had broken through the clouds, casting silver light across the land. It was quiet, but not the old kind of quiet. This one had heartbeats in it. When she turned back, James was awake, watching her. Neither spoke. The silence between them was something fragile and new, not emptiness but possibility. He smiled, barely, and she felt something gentle take root in her chest. She didn't know it yet, but the storm had brought more than travelers to her door. It had brought the first thread of change, soft and invisible, weaving through the walls that had held her still for too long. As she lay down that night, she could still hear the echo of the old man's words, "Act like your family." She thought about what that meant, how foreign it sounded and yet how right. The rain had stopped completely now. The land outside slept under its new coat of snow, quiet and clean. Evelyn closed her eyes and smiled faintly. The world felt different, like it might start over. And somewhere beyond the silence, the storm whispered back. Morning came pale and cold, the world glazed in frost. The storm had passed, but the hush it left behind was heavier than its noise. Evelyn stood outside, breath misting the air as she poured feed for the hens. The snow glimmered under the weak sun, the kind that offered light but no warmth. From inside the cabin came the faint creak of a floorboard, James moving quietly so as not to wake the old man still asleep by the fire. Eli's breathing was rough, his cough deeper than before. James had tended to him through the night, wiping his brow, murmuring words of comfort that carried the worn patience of someone who'd done this before. When Evelyn stepped back inside, she found James kneeling beside the hearth, coaxing the fire back to life. His face looked softer in the morning light, younger almost, though the shadows beneath his eyes told a story of many sleepless nights. "He needs rest," she said quietly. James nodded. "We'll stay till he's fit to move." "You can stay as long as you need," she replied, and meant it. She didn't understand why she felt safer with them there, only that the cabin didn't echo anymore. The days stretched gently. Evelyn cooked, James fixed the wagon wheel, and Eli told stories that trembled with the weight of memory. They shared small silences that felt comfortable rather than cold. Yet outside the cabin walls, whispers grew. A passing trapper had seen them together and carried tales back to town. Soon enough, the old gossip flared again, this time crueler. One afternoon, as Evelyn fetched water from the creek, she found 2 townsmen waiting by her fence. Their horses stamped the ground impatiently, their eyes sharp with judgment. "Didn't think you'd fallen so low, Evelyn," one sneered. "2 men under your roof? Folks are talkin'." Her hands tightened around the bucket handle. "Then let them talk. Town's got rules," the other said, spitting into the snow. "You best remember them." Before she could speak, James appeared from behind the cabin, his steps heavy with anger. "You've said enough," he told them, voice quiet but edged like a blade. The first man scoffed. "You ain't her husband, Cowboy. This don't concern you." James took another step forward. "She gave us shelter when the sky was falling apart. That's more kindness than either of you could dream of." The air crackled. Evelyn could feel the weight of violence hovering, But then Eli's frail voice drifted from the doorway, steady and clear despite his weakness. "James, son, don't fight wind with fists. Wind don't bleed, but hearts do." The men rode off with muttered curses, leaving behind churned snow and humiliation. Evelyn stood frozen, the sting of their words sinking deep. Shame and anger wrestled in her chest, but beneath it all was something else, an ache for how fiercely James had defended her. That night she sat by the fire long after Eli had fallen asleep. James was carving again, his hands working a small piece of wood. When he finished, he handed it to her without looking up. It was another bird, delicate and unfinished. "You always carve birds," she said softly. "They remind me to leave," he replied. "But this one, maybe it's meant to stay." She traced its smooth edges. "Thank you." He looked at her then, eyes quiet and full. "You kept us alive," he said. Evelyn felt the words settle in her like warmth. "So did you." The next morning, the world changed again. Riders came, 3 of them, their faces half hidden beneath the brims of their hats. James stiffened as soon as he saw them. Evelyn sensed the shift in the air, the old fear waking in his eyes. "Who are they?" she whispered. "People from a life I left behind," he said grimly. They dismounted, boots crunching on snow. The leader smiled without warmth. "Didn't think you'd crawl this far, James. You still owe us a reckoning." Eli tried to rise, his voice trembling. "There's no reckoning here, son. Only a sick man and the ones who cared for him." But the outlaw's gaze had fixed on Evelyn. "So this is where you've been hidin', behind a woman's skirts." Something inside James broke. "You'll leave her out of this," he said, stepping forward. The outlaw laughed, drawing his gun in one fluid motion. "Or what?" Evelyn didn't think, she only moved. Her father's old rifle had hung above the hearth for years, more memory than weapon, but her hands found it now, steady despite the terror crawling through her veins. She leveled it at the intruders, voice low and shaking. "Go. Before the storm catches you again." The laughter died. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then one of them reached for his pistol, and everything blurred. The crack of gunfire split the still air. Snow erupted in red spray. James lunged forward, shoving Evelyn aside as the bullet grazed his arm. He fired back once, clean and certain, and the outlaws fled into the trees, their curses fading with the wind. The quiet that followed was almost unbearable. Evelyn dropped the rifle and rushed to James, her hands trembling as she pressed a cloth against his bleeding shoulder. He winced but managed a faint smile. "You did good," he whispered. Eli sat watching from the corner, pride flickering in his eyes. "Family protects family," he murmured, and though his voice was weak, it carried something holy. 4 days afterward, James hovered between fever and sleep. Evelyn cared for him, spooning broth to his lips, singing the old songs her mother used to hum. Outside, the snow melted, and the world softened with the promise of spring. Eli's health waned with the passing days. One morning, Evelyn found him sitting quietly by the fire, his gaze far away. "When I go," he said, "don't mourn long. I've seen enough winters to know the kind worth dying in." Tears blurred her vision. "You'll see another." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. But promise me something, child. Don't forget that word I gave you, family. It's not blood. It's choosing someone and staying when the storms come." That night, he passed peacefully, his hand resting in hers. They buried him beneath the cottonwood tree, the same place where the land first began to thaw. James stood beside her, arm in a sling, face pale but alive. They said no prayers aloud, none were needed. The wind carried its own. Months slipped quietly by. The townsfolk who had once whispered now came offering tools, food, and quiet nods of respect. The cabin, once a place of exile, became a refuge again. James mended fences. Evelyn planted flowers near Eli's grave. Slowly, the silence between them turned into something gentle and permanent. When the next storm came, a wild, drumming rain like the one that had first brought them together, They stood on the porch, watching it fall. The sky flashed white with lightning. James reached for her hand, fingers rough but steady. "Guess storms ain't so bad after all," he said. Evelyn smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Not if you've got family inside." The rain came harder, washing the land clean once more. And though thunder rolled like a memory of all they'd survived, the light from their cabin glowed warm and unafraid. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the wind carried a whisper, soft and certain, home.